My ex tried to turn our kids against me, so I showed them who their father really was. The divorce was ugly, but I thought the worst was over. Then Dex started his campaign. It began subtly. My 12-year-old daughter, Mira, would come home from weekends at his place with new attitudes. "Dad says you only care about money," she'd mumble when I asked about school expenses. My 10-year-old son, Owen, stopped hugging me goodbye, claiming Dad said real men don't show emotion to their mothers. At first, I thought it was normal adjustment to the divorce. Kids act out when their world gets turned upside down, but the changes were too specific, too coordinated. "Why did you steal Dad's inheritance?" Owen asked one Tuesday after school. "What inheritance?" I said, genuinely confused. "Dad's grandmother left him money, but you took it. That's why we had to sell the big house." My blood ran cold. Dex's grandmother had died 3 years before we even met. There was no inheritance. But somehow, my 10-year-old son believed I'd stolen money from a dead woman I'd never met. The manipulation got worse. Dex told them I'd stolen their college funds to buy myself jewelry. He showed them fake bank statements with my name on luxury purchases I'd never made. He convinced them I'd filed for divorce because I was jealous of his success. "Look at this," Mira said one evening, shoving her phone in my face. "Dad sent me a screenshot of your shopping at Tiffany's. $12,000 on a necklace, while we can barely afford groceries." I stared at the obviously doctored image. The timestamp showed a date when I'd been in the hospital with appendicitis, but the photo quality was convincing enough to fool a 12-year-old. "Mira, I've never been to Tiffany's in my life," I said. "Dad said you'd deny it," she replied coldly. "He said you'd gaslight us just like you gaslit him." "Mom, why did you try to take Dad's business away?" Mira asked one evening, her voice cold. "I never did that," I said, confused. "Dad showed us the papers. Your signature is right there." I asked to see these papers, but Mira claimed she'd left them at Dad's house. Every weekend, there were new stories, new evidence of my supposed betrayal. Stories that painted me as vindictive, greedy, and unstable. Dex had always been a master manipulator. During our marriage, I'd watched him convince his business partners to sign contracts that heavily favored him by making them feel like they were getting exclusive deals. He'd talk his way out of traffic tickets by making officers feel sorry for his sick wife at home. He once convinced his own mother to lend him $50,000 by claiming I had cancer. I didn't have cancer. I didn't even know about the loan until after the divorce when his mother called demanding repayment. "I gave that money to help with your treatment," she'd sobbed over the phone. "Dex said you were too proud to ask for help yourself." When I explained that I'd never been sick, there was a long silence. "He played the recording for me," she whispered. "Your voice saying how scared you were about the diagnosis." "What recording?" "Of you crying on the phone about the cancer." I realized then that Dex had recorded me during my miscarriage scare 3 years earlier, when I'd been terrified about abnormal test results that turned out to be nothing. He'd taken my genuine fear about a completely different situation and used it to defraud his own mother. But I'd never imagined he'd use those same tactics on our children. The psychological warfare escalated weekly. Dex created fake text message screenshots showing me bad-mouthing the kids to imaginary friends. He doctored photos to make it look like I was out partying while they were sick. He even recorded fake voicemails in a voice similar to mine, leaving cruel messages that he'd play for the children as proof of my instability. "Listen to this," Owen said one Monday, holding up his tablet. A distorted voice that sounded vaguely like mine was saying, "Your father ruined my life, and now you two are going to pay for it." "I never said that," I protested. "Dad has the original voicemail," Owen replied. "He saved it in case you tried to deny it." Within 3 months, both kids treated me like a stranger. They'd roll their eyes when I spoke, question every rule I set, and openly defend their father's version of events. Owen started having nightmares about me taking him away from Dad forever. Mira began recording our conversations on her phone, claiming Dad needed evidence of my emotional abuse. "Why are you recording me?" I asked during one particularly tense dinner. "Dad says you might try to lie about what you said," Mira replied matter-of-factly. "He wants to protect me from your gaslighting." I'd never heard my 12-year-old daughter use the word gaslighting before. When I asked where she'd learned it, she said Dad had explained how I was doing it to her. The irony was devastating. Their homework habits changed. Previously straight A students, both kids started failing classes. When I offered help, they claimed Dad said I was sabotaging their education by confusing them with wrong information. "Dad's hiring us a real tutor," Mira announced. "Someone who actually cares about our success." The tutor turned out to be Dex's girlfriend, Vanessa, a 26-year-old yoga instructor with no teaching credentials who spent most sessions taking selfies with the kids and posting them with captions like "bonus mom life" and "loving these little ones like my own." During one pickup, I watched through the window as Vanessa painted Mira's nails while Owen did homework at the kitchen table. She was laughing at something on her phone instead of helping him with his math problems. "How was tutoring?" I asked when they got home. "Amazing," Mira gushed. "Vanessa is so much cooler than you. She actually listens to our problems instead of just lecturing us." "What kind of problems did you discuss?" "About how hard it is living with someone who's always angry and negative." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I'm not always angry." "Yes, you are," Owen chimed in. "Vanessa says it's because you're jealous that Dad found someone better." I tried addressing this through our lawyers, but Dex claimed Vanessa was just a family friend helping out. The courts couldn't restrict him from having friends assist with homework. The manipulation became more sophisticated. Dex started hosting family meetings at his house where he'd present evidence of my supposed wrongdoing. He'd have the kids take notes and ask questions, making them feel like participants in uncovering the truth rather than victims of manipulation. "We discussed your spending habits," Mira informed me after one such meeting. "Dad showed us how you spent $800 on clothes last month while claiming we couldn't afford new school supplies." "What clothes?" I asked. The receipts were right there. Target, Old Navy, department stores. I pulled up my bank statements. The charges were real, but they were for the kids' back-to-school shopping. Clothes and supplies for both of them. Those receipts were for your school things, I explained. Dad said you'd claim that. Mira replied with the confidence of someone who'd anticipated my response. But he explained how parents sometimes lie about what purchases are really for. My relationship with the kids deteriorated daily. They stopped calling to say goodnight when they were at his house. They forgot my birthday but threw an elaborate Father's Day celebration for Dex, complete with handmade cards thanking him for saving them from toxic negativity. The cards were heartbreaking to read. Owen had written, "Thank you for protecting me from Mom's anger and helping me understand that her problems aren't my fault." Mira's card read, "You're the only parent who really loves me. Thank you for showing me the truth even when it's hard to hear." Dex posted photos of the celebration on social media with the caption, "When children feel safe enough to express their real feelings, sometimes the truth hurts, but kids deserve honesty. Fatherhood, parentalienation, truth matters." The comments from his friends and family were brutal. Those poor babies. So brave of them to speak up. Their mother should be ashamed. I screenshotted everything, knowing it would be evidence of his campaign, but the damage to my reputation was already done. The breaking point came when Mira announced she wanted to live with Dad full-time. "You're just bitter and jealous," she said, using words that sounded foreign in her young voice. "Dad says you never loved us anyway. You only had kids to trap him." Owen nodded along, tears in his eyes. "Dad says you're trying to poison us against him, but he still loves you anyway. He feels sorry for you because you're sick in your head." "Sick in my head?" I repeated. Dad explained how some women get mental problems after divorce. Mira said with the authority of someone much older. "They can't accept that their husband found someone better, so they try to hurt innocent children. But Dad says it's not really your fault because you need help." The clinical way she delivered this diagnosis, clearly rehearsed, made my stomach turn. "He's taking us to a therapist who specializes in parental alienation," she continued. "Someone who can help us process the trauma you've caused." I stared at my daughter, the child I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through countless sleepless nights, cheered at every soccer game and school play. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust that broke my heart. That night, I sat in my empty house and made a decision. If Dex wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what dirty really looked like. I started digging through old files, searching for something I'd buried years ago. Back when we were married, I'd discovered things about Dex that made my skin crawl. Things I'd kept secret to protect our children's image of their father. Things I should have used in the divorce. The first discovery had happened 3 years into our marriage. I'd been looking for our tax documents when I found a hidden email account on his laptop. What I saw made me physically sick. Dex had been having affairs throughout our entire relationship. Not just one or two, dozens of women. He'd documented everything like trophies. Photos, videos, detailed emails describing what he'd done with each woman. Some were taken in our own bedroom while I was at work. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was reading his messages to these women about me. How I was pathetic and clingy. How he'd only married me because his father threatened to cut off his inheritance if he didn't settle down by 30. How he planned to divorce me once the kids were old enough that it wouldn't affect his image or his financial obligations. "My wife is so naive," he'd written to a woman named Celeste. "She actually believes I love her. Sometimes I feel bad for how easy it is to fool her. But she's useful. Good mother, keeps house, doesn't ask questions. Perfect cover for what I really want." Another message to a different woman. "The kids are props. Necessary for the family man image, but honestly just expensive and annoying. Thank God their mother does all the actual parenting. I just show up for photos and school events when other parents are watching." To a woman named Rebecca. "Elena thinks we have this perfect marriage because I tell her what she wants to hear. Women are so desperate to believe in fairy tales. A few flowers, some sweet words, and she'll forgive anything. It's almost too easy." The most devastating message was to someone called Miranda. "I've trained Elena not to question me by making her feel guilty whenever she gets suspicious. I tell her she's being paranoid or insecure and she immediately apologizes. It's pathetic how well it works. She'd rather live in denial than face the truth about what I really think of her." I'd confronted him that night. He'd cried, begged for forgiveness, promised it would never happen again. He'd convinced me that the other women meant nothing, that I was overreacting to harmless flirtation. "You're taking these messages out of context," he'd sobbed. "I was just trying to impress them. Men say stupid things when they're trying to get laid. It doesn't mean anything. You called me pathetic," I'd whispered. "I was being an asshole to sound cool. You know I think you're amazing. Look at my actions, not some stupid emails to women who don't matter." He'd spent weeks proving his love. Flowers, romantic dinners, heartfelt apologies. He'd even suggested couples therapy to rebuild our trust. Like an idiot, I believed him. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed for the kids. The second discovery came a year later. I was organizing his office when I found a flash drive hidden behind his diploma. The contents were worse than the affairs. Dex had been embezzling money from his father's construction company for years. Fake invoices, phantom employees, diverted payments. He'd stolen over $400,000. His father trusted him completely, had even made him company treasurer, never suspecting his son was bleeding the family business dry. The scheme was sophisticated. Dex had created shell companies with names similar to legitimate suppliers. He'd submit invoices for materials never delivered, approve payments to employees who didn't exist, and skim percentage from every major contract. But Dex had gotten creative with covering his tracks. He'd been using my name and social security number for some of the fake accounts. If anyone discovered the theft, all evidence would point to me. Bank statements, tax documents, business filings, all showed me as the perpetrator. He'd even forged my signature on loan applications, creating a paper trail that made me look like the mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme. One particularly damning document showed me as the sole owner of a company called EM Construction Solutions, using my initials. that had received $80,000 in fraudulent payments over 6 months. The bank account was opened with my stolen identity, complete with fake ID documents using my photo. I was terrified. I made copies of everything and hid them, but I couldn't risk exposing him, not when he'd framed me as his accomplice. If the truth came out, I'd go to prison while he claimed to be another victim of my greed. The third discovery was the most disturbing. 2 months before I filed for divorce, I found photos on his phone that made my blood freeze. Pictures of our children's friends during sleepovers. Close-ups of 12 and 13-year-old girls in their pajamas taken without their knowledge. Some photos were taken through the bathroom keyhole. Others showed girls sleeping, their blankets carefully adjusted to reveal more skin. There were hundreds of images, all of children who trusted him as a friend's father. The photos were organized into folders by child's name. Each folder contained dozens of images taken over multiple visits, suggesting a systematic pattern of behavior. The worst folder was labeled Best Shots and contained the most invasive images. Close-ups of sleeping children, photos taken from under stairwells looking up, images captured through slightly open doors. I'd grabbed the phone and run to the police station that very night. But when Detective Morrison reviewed the images, he explained that while disturbing, they weren't technically illegal. No nudity, no direct contact, just a creepy father figure with a camera. This is clearly predatory behavior, Morrison said carefully. But without evidence of physical contact or explicit images, we can't make an arrest. What if he's already hurt someone? I asked. We have no evidence of physical contact, Morrison said, but we'll keep this file open. If any parent reports inappropriate behavior, we'll have documentation of a pattern. He'd given me his card and told me to call immediately if I noticed any escalation. Keep him away from those children, the detective advised, and document everything. If this escalates, we'll need evidence of a pattern. That night, I told Dex I wanted a divorce. I didn't mention the photos. I was terrified he'd destroy evidence or, worse, escalate his behavior if he knew I'd discovered them. Throughout our divorce proceedings, I kept his secrets. I let him paint me as the unstable wife who'd left him for no reason. I accepted a smaller settlement than I deserved because I was afraid of what he might do if I fought back. I thought I was protecting everyone, my children, his family, even the girls in those photos. I convinced myself that divorce would solve the problem, that removing him from our daily lives would keep everyone safe. But Dex hadn't extended me the same courtesy. He'd systematically destroyed my relationship with our children using lies and manipulation, turning them into weapons against me. Now, sitting in my attic with all this evidence spread before me, I realized my mistake. I'd tried to take the high road while he'd been digging tunnels underneath it. It was time for the truth. I spent the next week preparing. I made copies of everything, organized the evidence chronologically, and consulted with a new lawyer about the implications of revealing information I'd withheld during our divorce. You could have used this before, Attorney Sarah Chen said, reviewing the financial documents. I was scared, I admitted. He'd set me up to take the fall. But you have proof of the setup. These forged signatures, the timeline of when accounts were opened, it clearly shows fraud. She pointed to discrepancies in the handwriting analysis. Your real signatures have consistent pressure and flow. These forgeries show hesitation marks and different pen angles. Any handwriting expert would spot the differences immediately. What about the photos? She studied them carefully. Still not criminal, but definitely admissible as character evidence, especially combined with the other material. And my kids? Will this hurt them? Short term, yes, they'll be confused and angry. But long term, they deserve to know who their father really is. Otherwise, they'll spend their lives being manipulated by him. She leaned back in her chair. Elena, you realize what you're up against? He spent months programming them to distrust you. They're going to resist this information initially. I know, I said, but I can't let him destroy their reality permanently. The next Friday, when Dex came to pick up the kids, I was ready. He arrived with his usual charm, kissing both children and making a show of being the loving father. Vanessa waited in the car, taking selfies. Before you go, I said calmly, I need to show you both something. Mira rolled her eyes. Mom, we don't want to hear more lies about Dad. These aren't lies, I said, opening my laptop. These are documents from when your father and I were married. Dex's face went pale. Elena, whatever you think you're doing, sit down, I said firmly, both of you. I started with the financial records. Bank statements showing the diverted funds, email chains discussing fake employees, screenshots of accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. Your father stole almost $500,000 from your grandfather, I explained. Then he set up the accounts to make it look like I was involved. Owen frowned. That's not true. Dad would never. Look at the dates, I said gently. Look at the signatures. This is all documented. I showed them a side-by-side comparison of my real signature versus the forged ones. The differences were obvious once you knew what to look for. See how my real signature flows smoothly? I pointed to several authentic documents. And look at these forgeries. You can see where someone lifted the pen and started again. They're trying to copy my handwriting, but they're not natural. Mira studied the screen, her confidence wavering. Dad, is this real? Dex stood up abruptly. Your mother is fabricating evidence to make me look bad. This is exactly the kind of manipulation I've been warning you about. Then explain this, I said, pulling up the next folder. The email thread with his affairs filled the screen. I'd carefully edited out the explicit details, but the emotional manipulation was clear. His words about our marriage, about me, about his plans to leave once it was convenient. These are from 2018, I said quietly, 2 years before our divorce. Read what your father really thought about our family. Mira's hand covered her mouth as she read. Owen looked confused, too young to fully understand the implications. This can't be real, Mira whispered. Dad loves us. He loves our family. Keep reading, I said softly. The worst message was near the bottom. The kids are useful for keeping up appearances, but honestly, they're mostly just expensive and annoying. Thank God for their mother doing all the actual parenting. I can't wait until they're old enough that I can see them on my terms instead of pretending to care about homework and bedtime stories. Mira's face crumpled. You said you fought for custody because you loved us. Dex's charm cracked. You don't understand the context. These women meant nothing. I was just trying to impress them. By calling your children expensive and annoying, I asked. I clicked to another message. Here's what he said about Mira's dance recital. Had to sit through 2 hours of kids stumbling around on stage. The things we do for appearances. At least Elena handles all this kid stuff so I don't have to pretend to care most of the time. Mira's eyes filled with tears. You told me you loved watching me dance. I do love, Dex started. And here's his response when someone asked about Owen's baseball games. I continued. Little League is mind-numbing, but other dads go, so I have to show up occasionally. Mostly I just check emails on my phone and leave early. Owen's voice was small. You said you were proud of me. Then explain the context, I said, opening the final folder. The photos appeared on screen, carefully selected ones that showed the angles and locations without exposing the children. I'd added timestamps and location data. These were taken in our house, I said, during sleepovers, without permission, without the children knowing. I showed them a photo taken through our bathroom keyhole during Mira's 13th birthday party. Another of Owen's friends sleeping, taken from inches away. This one shows the metadata, I explained, pointing to the technical details. Taken at 2:47 a.m. during Lucy's sleepover. She was 13 years old. Owen looked confused, but Mira understood immediately. Her face went white. You took pictures of my friends? She whispered. Those aren't what they look like, Dex said desperately. There's an explanation. The police have copies, I said quietly. They couldn't arrest you, but they have a file. Detective Morrison said to call if anything else happened. I pulled up the police report number. Case file 2019-04-1847. You can call and verify this if you want. The room fell silent except for Mira's soft crying. Why didn't you tell us before? Owen asked, still trying to process. Because I wanted you to love your father, I said honestly. I thought I was protecting you by keeping his secrets. But he didn't protect me. He spent months lying to you about who I am. What lies? Mira asked through her tears. I pulled up my phone and showed them the fake bank statements Dex had created. There's no jewelry purchases, no stolen college funds. Your dad created these to make you hate me. I compared the fake documents with my real bank statements. Look at the fonts. They don't match. And see these transaction codes? They're not the format our bank uses. But the papers he showed us? Forgeries. Just like the signatures on the business accounts. I showed them examples of Dex's photo manipulation, including the metadata that proved when and how the images had been altered. Owen's voice was small. Dad said you were sick in your head. The only sick thing here is a grown man who photographs children without permission and steals from his own father, I said. Dex made one last desperate attempt. Your mother is vindictive. She's fabricated all of this because she can't handle losing in court. I have the original hard drives, I said calmly. The police have copies. Your father's old boss has copies. The timestamps can be verified. The bank accounts can be traced. I looked directly at him. Would you like me to call Detective Morrison right now? I held up my phone, his contact information clearly visible. Dex's shoulders sagged. The mask finally slipped completely. You vindictive bitch, he snarled. You've turned them against me. Watch your language in front of the children, I said calmly. Don't tell me how to talk to my kids. Actually, these documents show you rarely talk to your kids except when it benefits you, I replied. Would you like me to read some more of your messages about how tedious parenting is? I didn't turn them against you, I added quietly. I showed them who you really are. This will destroy them, he said, gesturing to the kids. No, I replied. Your lies were destroying them. The truth will set them free. Mira stood up, still crying. I want to go to my room. We can talk about this, I said gently. Or we can wait until you're ready. I need to think, she said. Owen followed his sister upstairs, shooting confused glances between his father and me. Dex and I sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, Vanessa honked the horn impatiently. You've destroyed my relationship with my children, he said finally. You destroyed it yourself, I replied. I just stopped covering for you. What do you want? I want you to stop lying to them about me. I want you to get therapy. And I want you to understand that if you ever manipulate them again, all of this goes public. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting my children from their father, something I should have done years ago. They'll never forgive you for this. Maybe not, I said, but at least they'll know the truth. You've ruined their innocence. You ruined it when you decided to use them as weapons against me. The horn honked again, longer this time. Your girlfriend's waiting, I said. This isn't over, Dex said, standing up. Yes, it is, I replied. The only question now is whether you want to rebuild an honest relationship with them or lose them completely. That weekend, Dex didn't take the kids. He called and said he needed time to think. The following Monday, Mira came to me before school. Mom, I'm sorry I said those things. About you not loving us. You don't need to apologize, I said, hugging her. He's very good at making people believe him. Were you scared? She asked. When you found all that stuff? Terrified, I admitted, but more scared of losing you forever. Why didn't Dad want us to know? Because the truth would have ruined his plans. He wanted to be the good parent while making me the villain. I feel so stupid, she said. All those things he showed us. I should have known they were fake. You're 12 years old, I said gently. It's not your job to fact-check your father. You trusted him because that's what children do. Over the next few weeks, the kids started asking questions. Real questions, not accusations. We talked about manipulation, about how adults sometimes lie, about why I'd kept secrets to protect them. Owen struggled more than Mira. He was younger, and his image of his father had been less complex. But gradually, he began to understand why certain things had never made sense. "Why did Dad always have meetings when I had baseball games?" he asked one evening. "Because he only showed up when other parents were watching," I said gently. "He cared more about looking like a good father than being one." "But he said you wouldn't let him come. When did I ever stop him from going to your games?" Owen thought about it. "You didn't. You always asked if he was coming." "That's right. And you always packed extra snacks in case he wanted to stay after." "I did, but he never stayed," Owen said quietly. "He always left before the game ended." The healing process was complicated. Both kids went through stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Some days they were furious with me for destroying their image of their father. Other days they were angry with him for lying. Most days they were just confused and hurt. I enrolled them in therapy with Dr. Patricia Williams, a specialist in parental alienation recovery. She helped them understand that both their love for their father and their anger about his deception were valid feelings. "Children aren't supposed to have to choose sides," she explained to them. "Your father put you in an impossible position by asking you to reject your mother based on lies." 3 months later, Dex started supervised visits. He'd entered therapy and anger management, though I suspected it was more about avoiding further consequences than genuine change. The kids saw him every other weekend, but their relationship remained strained. Mira was old enough to recognize his manipulation attempts. Owen was more forgiving, but maintained healthy skepticism. "Dad keeps apologizing," Mira told me after one visit, "but he also keeps making excuses. He says the affairs didn't mean anything because he didn't love those women." "What do you think about that?" I asked. "I think it makes it worse. If he didn't love them, why did he hurt you for nothing? And he says the business thing was just borrowing money from Grandpa, but he never asked permission," Owen added. "That's still stealing, right?" "What do you think?" I asked. "I think if you have to lie about it, you know it's wrong." The supervised visits revealed more concerning behavior. Dex spent most sessions trying to convince the kids that I'd manipulated the evidence somehow. He brought printed articles about false allegations and vindictive ex-wives, trying to plant seeds of doubt about my credibility. "Dad gave us homework," Mira announced after one visit. "He wants us to research parental alienation and false accusations." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to do the research," she said, "but I want to look at both sides, not just the articles he picked." Her research project became an eye-opening experience. She learned about the difference between legitimate parental alienation and justified rejection of an abusive parent. She discovered that false allegations are far less common than the websites Dex had shown her claimed. Most importantly, she learned to trust her own instincts again. "The article Dad gave me says children who reject a parent are always being manipulated," she told me. "But that doesn't make sense. Sometimes kids have good reasons not to trust someone." 6 months after our confrontation, Dex's father discovered the embezzlement during a routine audit. The family business pressed charges. Dex served 18 months in county jail and was ordered to pay full restitution. The investigation revealed even more crimes. Dex had also been skimming from client escrow accounts and falsifying insurance claims. The total amount stolen exceeded $600,000. During his sentencing, I sat in the back of the courtroom with both kids. They'd asked to come, said they needed to see it. When the judge read the sentence, Mira squeezed my hand. "Do you feel bad for him?" she whispered. "I feel bad for the person I thought he was," I said honestly, "but not for the person he actually is." "I feel bad for Grandpa," Owen said quietly. "Dad stole from his own family." "Grandpa said he's not angry at us," Mira added. "He knows we didn't know." Dex's father had reached out after the arrest, apologizing for not believing me during the divorce. "I should have listened when you tried to tell me something was wrong," he'd said. "I was so focused on protecting my son that I failed to protect my grandchildren." After his release, Dex moved across the country for a fresh start. The kids talk to him occasionally, but they understand now who he really is. They're polite but distant, no longer vulnerable to his manipulation. The healing process was long and complicated. Both kids needed therapy to process the betrayal and learn to trust their own judgment again. Mira struggled with guilt over the things she'd said to me. Owen had nightmares about the photos, worried that his friends weren't safe around his father, but they were resilient. Slowly, they rebuilt their sense of reality without Dex's distortions. Dr. Williams helped them understand that their father's behavior wasn't their fault, and that loving someone doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation. "You can love your father and still recognize that his actions were wrong," she explained. "Love doesn't require blind loyalty." The kids also learned to recognize manipulation tactics, not just from their father, but from anyone who might try to exploit their trusting nature. "I can spot fake apologies now," Mira told me proudly, "like when someone says sorry but then explains why it wasn't really their fault. And I know the difference between secrets and privacy," Owen added. "Privacy is about respecting boundaries. Secrets are about hiding bad things." Last month, Mira started high school. During orientation, parents were asked to share something they'd taught their children. "I taught my kids that love requires honesty," I said when it was my turn, "that protecting someone's feelings isn't worth sacrificing your own integrity." After the meeting, Mira hugged me in the parking lot. "I'm glad you finally told us the truth," she said, "even though it hurt." "Me too," I said. "I used to think you were weak for not fighting back during the divorce," she admitted. "But now I understand you were trying to protect us." "That wasn't weak. That was love." Owen joined our hug. "Mom, I'm sorry I recorded you, and I'm sorry I said Dad felt sorry for you. You were just repeating what you'd been told," I said. "None of that was your fault. I know that now," he said. but I still want to say sorry. And I'm sorry I believed him when he said you were jealous and bitter, Mira added. I should have trusted you more. You were children being manipulated by an adult, I said firmly. That's not your responsibility to figure out. Today, our relationship is stronger than ever. The kids talk to me about everything now. School problems, friend drama, their hopes and fears. They know I'll tell them the truth, even when it's difficult. Mira is considering studying psychology in college. Inspired by her experience with manipulation and recovery, Owen wants to be a teacher, someone who protects children and helps them feel safe. I want to be the kind of adult who actually listens to kids, he told me. Not someone who pretends to care, but doesn't really. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally the mother my children deserved. The mother who chose truth over comfort, protection over peace, and their futures over their father's lies. The mother who learned that sometimes love means destroying someone's illusions to save their reality. The mother who understood that the hardest battles are worth fighting when your children's souls are at stake.